Welcome back to League Unlock. My name is Eric Kummel, and LCS playoffs. There was a lot of hype coming into these finals in both NA and EU, and what do we get? We're combined for a 6-0 finals matchups between Team Liquid and 100 Thieves and G2 and Fnatic. This was advertised the clash of kings, of titans, the heroes of the European LCS, combining for 9 of the 10 LCS titles coming into this matchup. Only Alliance, we still got to give them shoutouts, are the third team to win an LCS title. And again, it ends up being a 3-0 sweep in the favor of Fnatic, which I do think is a more interesting storyline. The turning points again, you're still probably, this one, you could say game 2, maybe you could argue points in game 1, but this team fight, G2, is getting somewhat ahead, but then it starts off with a Broxa flash ult on Perks, who has no summoners from an earlier fight, and then Bwipo gets a 4-man decimating smash on the Scion, and that is just going to be a lot of death for G2. Reckless with the Ricochet, gonna clean it up. Triple kill. By the way, he had an unofficial pentakill in game 1. And in game 2, he gets redemption, and Caps, nice guy Caps, leaves it for him. Pentakill, he basically had 2 pentakills in 2 games. That leads to a Baron, and Fnatic totally snowballs game 2 out of there. Game 3, not even close. Fnatic takes it. That first game, there were also some fights that were very close. The first Baron that G2 got, and then Fnatic ends up getting a bunch of kills from it. That was another big turning point, but G2 was still in game 2. An overall theme from these games was the early game. Jankos putting in some work, getting G2 ahead, but the late game, mid-game team fights with Reckless and Caps just was not close. Heavily in Fnatic's favor. Caps totally outclassed Perks in this series. He did make it look like Perks was playing at an international competition, but by the way, that trash talk doesn't really work for me. Perks performed well at MSI and kept up with Faker in that series, so he's not always bad internationally. Obviously, you got to talk about Reckless because the guy was absolutely insane. Continues to be. His numbers are absolutely ludicrous, but I want to give some credit to the man in the top lane, Bwipo, for Fnatic. Coming into this was the key matchup that I thought, and most people thought, G2 could exploit, but Bwipo actually kept up with them. Across the board, the CS numbers are pretty similar. Even everything at 15 minutes was pretty similar for them, and this was something that G2 was looking to take advantage of. I know Bwipo played 3 Scion games in a row, but he performed super well. This is one of the key fights that turned around the series. You saw him flash into the Baron pit and get a 5-man knock up with his shield, and then catching out Hjarnan here. He made some key plays to keep them to win these games for Fnatic, and both junglers put a surprising amount of attention in that top lane. I thought Fnatic would just kind of abandon Bwipo in that top lane, but Broxa was actually there to counter gank a lot of Jankos' action, and Bwipo is just such a team player. He knew what his role was coming into this game. He's on tank duty pretty much the entire time and performs at a super high level, matching Wunder in a lot of these, and they even tried putting Wunder on the gangplank to carry some of these games, but Bwipo performed fantastically for Fnatic. Obviously, the main credit goes to Reckless and Caps, because those are your damage guys, and again, Reckless, I believe he's got an 89 KDA on Tristana this split. 89, that's absolutely disgusting. He didn't die in this set. 2 pentakills, really? I'm giving him 2. That first one should have been a penta. It was like 1 second away from being a penta in between kills 3 and 4, but he got Finals MVP, regular season MVP. By the way, the first ever player in LCS history, not just EU and NA, to win back-to-back MVPs. So kudos to Reckless, and I'm excited to see Fnatic perform at MSI and see what Reckless can do against some other premier AD carries, Doublelift and Reckless. That's pretty hype. That wasn't the only action from the EU LCS over the weekend. We finally had a set in the LCS. Actually, we started with a set that went to 5 games. And you're thinking, wow, this is going to be a crazy weekend. Splice, Vitality. Of course, the games after that ended up all being 3-0s. But the Splice Vitality series had a lot of juicy content, a lot of pretty hype games. It wasn't the highest quality, if I'm being honest, but I mean, there were a lot of crazy fights, and the man who stood out was in the mid lane. You'd think it'd be Jizuki, but since Splice are winning that series, and Niski really had his way with Jizuki in that mid lane. Jizuki did not look very good. Niski 7.2 KDA, over 70% kill participation, and we'll get to the 1v9 clip in a second. This was the most questioned player by me and lots of other players in the regular season, but he has stepped it up in a huge way in the playoffs. He looked great against even G2, going back to that series. H2K, he was not H2K, excuse me. He was fantastic against Roccat, G2, and now this set. He was the playoff MVP for Splice, and I mean, he was destroying Jizuki, excuse me, in the laning phase and in the team fights. Even the games they lost, that first game on the Zoe, he was the only positive thing for Splice. So Niski had an absolutely monstrous series for the Splice boys, and you got to give him a lot of credit. This is the incredible 1v9 play on the Cassiopeia. Yeah, he's insanely ahead. It's 9-0, but it's literally 1v5. He flashes into the entire team and comes away with 2 kills. He does eventually go down, so yes, he was inting. What a terrible play by him. But a couple different champions. I mean, he was playing the Zoe. He looked really solid on that. 2 games of Zoe. Obviously the Cassiopeia. And then he had 1 game on Azir that they did end up losing, which wasn't fantastic. But I mean, he looked clean on the Snake here in both games honor, and really just a super solid performance from him. Good for Splice. They book their ticket to Rift Rivals, now joining Fnatic and G2. And with that, matchups are set. Fnatic, G2, Splice taking on Liquid, 100 Thieves, and Echo Fox. And there's a lot of interesting matchups there. Doublelift versus Reckless. There's a lot of top-tier junglers. You saw Dardoch tweeting it out. So Dardoch, Xmithie, Meteos taking on Xerxes, Jankos, and Broxa. There's a lot of interesting storylines. And assuming these teams continue to play well by the time Rift Rivals actually comes around, because, you know, last year P1 finished 3rd, and they ended up being very terrible in the summer season, but they still went 4-2 at Rift Rivals. So Rift Rivals going to be a very interesting time, even though it doesn't really mean anything. Anytime you can renew the EU NA rivalry, it's going to be a good time.